The weight of a honeyed gaze. The word beautiful was the first currency I ever understood. It was not a compliment given to me directly, but a valuation whispered about me in the market. At the village well, a speculative murmur passed between aunties like a precious heavy coin. The scribe's daughter. Such a tragedy. Her mother gone. But have you seen her? So beautiful. That will be her fortune. Or her ruin. I, Eliza, learned to navigate the world by the reflection of myself in the eyes of others. In my father's eyes, I was a treasure to be protected. The living memory of his beloved wife, whose hazel eyes and cascade of dark hair I had inherited. His love was a warm, steady flame in our small two-room house that always smelled of ink and old paper. He was a man of letters in a world of labor, his hands perpetually stained blue, his shoulders stooped from bending over legal documents and love letters for those who could not write their own. He taught me to read and write, a rare and frivolous skill for a girl, he said, but one my mother would have insisted upon. A mind is the one thing the world cannot take from you, Beta, he would say, his voice soft with a grief that never fully left him. But his love could not outweigh the calculations of society. An orphaned girl, even one with a living father, is a burden. A beautiful orphaned girl is a potential asset, and assets are to be traded. My beauty was my only dowry. I was 16 when the Aditya family came calling. They were merchants of solid middle-class standing, their house made of sturdy brick, not mud, their pantry famously well-stocked. Their son, Arjun, was 22, handsome in a soft, unformed way, with large, liquid eyes and a smile that promised kindness. He saw me once at the temple during Diwali, a flicker of a girl in a faded yellow sari, holding her father's arm. He later told me it was like seeing a poem come to life. The negotiations were brief. My father, his health already a fragile thing, his heart perpetually weary, saw a safe harbor for me. He saw a roof, regular meals, and a husband who seemed gentle. The Adityas saw a girl of stunning beauty who would elevate their son's standing, from a family too poor and powerless to make any demands. They acquired me. The wedding was a blur of scarlet silk, the heady scent of marigolds, and the crushing weight of my father's tears as he placed my mother's thin, gold wedding necklace around my throat. "Be happy, my Eliza," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Be safe. Your mother. She would be so proud of the woman you've become." The words felt like a farewell. Life in the Aditya household was a study in quiet tension. My mother-in-law, Shobha, was a woman carved from marble and disapproval. Her mouth was a perpetual tight line, her eyes constantly auditing my every move, the way I swept the courtyard, the consistency of my doll, the modest slope of my eyes when I addressed my elders. My father-in-law, Mr. Aditya, was a benign presence, more concerned with his account books than his new daughter-in-law, though he was never unkind. The house was full of things but empty of warmth. Arjun, however, was my sanctuary. He was shy, bookish, and utterly enchanted by me. He treated me not as a wife he had been given, but as a rare manuscript he had been privileged to read. In the evenings, after the household had retired, we would steal away to the small, secluded balcony attached to our room. It became our secret world. We would spread a worn cotton quilt on the cool stone floor, and he would bring a pot of sweet, milky chai. He'd read to me, poetry mostly, Tagore and Ghalib, his voice a soft murmur against the backdrop of crickets and the distant hum of the town. He would point to the sky, a vast black canvas splattered with infinite diamonds, and trace the constellations with a slender finger. "Look, Eliza," he'd say, his arm around me, my head nestled in the hollow of his shoulder. "The moon is a lover, chasing the sun across the sky, never to catch her, only to be illuminated by her distant light. And see there, that sliver of darkness? That is the new moon. It is not an absence, my love, it is a promise, a blank page, a chance for the story to begin again." In those moments, wrapped in the scent of night-blooming jasmine and his affection, I felt something real begin to grow between us. It wasn't the passionate love of stories, but a tender, fragile thing, built on shared silence and the poetry of the night sky. I began to love the dreamer in him, the man who saw magic in the darkness. I believed, truly believed, that our story would be a gentle, unfolding one. The disaster did not announce itself with thunder. It crept in on silent feet. It began with a fatigue Arjun couldn't shake. Then, a loss of his appetite for the rich foods his mother piled on his plate. He started complaining of a deep, aching pain in his back, a metallic taste in his mouth. The lively spark in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a constant weary ache. Doctors were called. Our money, the Aditya family's comfortable savings, began to flow into clinics, pharmacies, and temples. The diagnoses were vague at first: stress, a vitamin deficiency, a lingering infection. But the truth, When it finally came, was a sledgehammer blow delivered in the sterile, white-walled room of a specialist in the city. End-stage renal failure, the doctor said, his voice devoid of inflection. Both kidneys. They are functioning at less than 10%. Without dialysis and ultimately a transplant, there is no hope. The word transplant hung in the air, foreign and terrifying. The vibrant young man I married vanished, replaced by a gaunt, yellowed ghost who spent his days propped on pillows, his body swollen, his breath sour with the unmistakable odor of internal decay. The poetry books gathered dust. Our balcony, once a haven, became a place of painful memory, the moon a mocking reminder of the promises he could no longer keep. The family mobilized, but into a frantic, disorganized panic. Prayers and pilgrimages were mixed with expensive, dubious tonics from traveling quacks. The account books, once Mr. Aditya's pride, were now a source of visible despair as the numbers dwindled. The doctor's advice was clear: find a living donor. A kidney from a family member was his best chance. This was when the architecture of the family began to show its cracks. The uncles and aunts who had praised Arjun's brilliance, the cousins who had laughed with him, all found reasons, impeccable and sympathetic, why they could not possibly give. My diabetes. My young children depend on me. The risk is too great. The excuses were a symphony of cowardice, each note perfectly pitched to convey regret while offering nothing. I, the orphan, the outsider with no blood claim, became a beggar. I swallowed my pride, a bitter pill I washed down with tears. I went to them, to these prosperous, healthy men and women, and I fell at their feet. I, who had been valued only for my beauty, now used my tears as a weapon, my desperation as a plea. "He is your nephew, your brother, your cousin," I would sob, clutching the hem of a silk sari. "You have known him since he was a boy. Please do not let him die." They would lift me up, their faces masks of pity, their words empty. "We pray for him, Betty. God will provide a way." God was not providing. And my father, watching his daughter's life unravel into this nightmare of pleading and decay, could not bear it. The worry, the helplessness, was a weight his frail heart was not built to carry. He died in his sleep one night, quietly and without fuss, as if not to be a further burden. The last thread connecting me to my past was severed. I was utterly alone. The grief was a physical pain, a second sickness, but I had no time for it. Arjun was fading before my eyes. Dialysis was a temporary, brutal, and expensive measure that was draining the family's coffers and his spirit. He would return from the clinic pale and hollowed out, a man tethered to a machine. It was then I knew what I had to do. I went to the doctors myself. "Test me," I said, my voice raw from tears and lack of sleep. The tests were a lengthy, invasive ordeal, and then the result? A match. A near-perfect match. The orphan was the only one who could save him. When I told Arjun, he wept. Great, heaving sobs that shook his wasted frame. "No, Eliza, no! I will not let you. To cut yourself open for me. To live the rest of your life with a part of you missing. I cannot bear that debt." I took his clammy hand, the skin loose on his bones. I used his own poetry against him. "It is not a debt," I whispered, my voice fierce with a love that felt like madness. "It is a connection, deeper than marriage. You will carry a part of me with you, always. My blood will clean your blood. My life will sustain your life. We will be forever intertwined. It is the most beautiful thing we will ever do." I sold the only thing I had left of my father, his small, dusty house and the plot of land it stood on. The money was a pittance against the mounting medical debt, so I did the unthinkable. I went to a moneylender, a man named Goyle, who operated from a small, dark office that smelled of cheap cigars and desperation. He had cold, reptilian eyes and a smile that didn't touch them. The papers I signed were in language I didn't fully understand. The interest rate a predatory monster that would grow in the dark. The surgery was scheduled. The night before, we lay in our bed side by side, not touching. The air was thick with fear and a terrible sacred anticipation. "I'm afraid, Eliza," he whispered into the darkness. "So am I replied. "But we will be afraid together, and then we will heal together." The operation was a voyage into nothingness. The cold of the operating table, the mask over my face, the chemical smell, and then black. Waking up was to be born into a world of pure, white-hot pain. It felt as if I had been split in two, my side a raging fire of sliced muscle and nerve. But when they wheeled my bed next to his in the recovery room, and I saw him, the gray pallor already giving way to a healthier pink, his breathing deep and even for the first time in months, the pain became something else. It became a sacrament. It was proof. My love was not just words whispered on a balcony. It was visceral, physical, and now it was circulating inside him, giving him life. The financial pain, however, had only just begun. My father's money was gone, swallowed by the hospital. Goyle, the moneylender, began his quiet, relentless siege. The interest compounded daily, a vicious snake eating its own tail. The Aditya family business, neglected during the crisis, had faltered. Clients had gone elsewhere. The comfortable life evaporated, and with it, the last vestiges of civility. Shobha's pinched mouth became a vehicle for open resentment. "The bills keep coming," she would mutter, slamming pots down on the stove. "Even saved, he is a drain. And you? You are just another mouth to feed, and a broken one at that." I was no longer the beautiful daughter-in-law. I was an invalid, a reminder of their failure, a walking, aching symbol of their poverty. Arjun recovered his health, but the man who emerged was a stranger. The poet was dead. The dreamer was gone. In his place was a sullen, shadowed man weighed down by a debt he could not repay. Not just the financial one, but the physiological one. My sacrifice, which he had once romanticized as a beautiful connection, now felt to him like an unbreakable chain of obligation and shame. He could barely look at me. My presence was a constant reproach. Our balcony remained empty, the moon cycling through its phases unseen. Poverty moved in with us. It was in the single, watery vegetable curry stretched to feed 5 people. It was in the way we patched our clothes until the patches needed patches. It was in the constant, gnawing anxiety that preceded Goyle's monthly visits, where his polite inquiries about Arjun's health were laced with a palpable threat. And then I discovered I was pregnant. It should have been a joy. It was a terror. Another mouth to feed. Another life born into this desperate scarcity. Arjun's face, when I told him, was a complex map of confusion, fear, and a faint, ghostly flicker of something that might have been hope before it was extinguished by reality. Eric was born into the smell of debt. He was a small, quiet baby with my mother's hazel eyes. He was my only light. But even his infancy was marred by want. There was never enough milk, never enough for proper medicine when he had a fever. Goyle's threats became less veiled. He spoke of unfortunate accidents, of the shame a family would face if their debts were made public. My mother-in-law saw a way out. She came to me one afternoon, her face set in grim determination. "There is an agency," she said without preamble. "They place girls in good houses in Dubai, as maids. The pay is very high. You will go, you will pay the debt, you will keep your husband and his medicines, you will provide for your son." It was not a suggestion. It was a sentence. Arjun said nothing. He sat in the corner staring at the wall, his body whole and healthy, his spirit utterly broken. He was a prisoner of his own salvation. The agency was a stark, officious place. I was processed like a package. My passport was taken. I was given a stiff, blue polyester sari uniform and a list of rules. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look the men in the eye. Do not use the phone without permission. Your salary will be sent directly to your family. You will receive a small stipend for yourself. The flight to Dubai was a journey into another dimension. The city was a mirage of impossible glass and steel towers rising from the desert. The heat was a physical blow. The house I was taken to was a palace of cold, echoing marble, owned by a wealthy local family who spoke to me only to bark orders. My world shrank to the 4 walls of that mansion. I was less a person than a function. I scrubbed floors on my hands and knees until the skin peeled away. I polished silver until my fingers were blackened. I washed windows so high I felt dizzy. The mistress of the house was a capricious woman with a sharp tongue and sharper nails. She would pinch me if she found dust, scream at me in Arabic I didn't understand, her spittle landing on my face. I slept on a thin mattress in an airless storage room. I was fed their leftovers, cold, greasy rice, pieces of meat they had picked over. The loneliness was a vast, empty ocean. I was starved for touch, for a kind word, for the sound of my own name spoken with anything but contempt. But through the hell, I held on to 2 images, Arjun, growing stronger on the money I sent, and Eric, my little Eric. I had a grainy printed photograph of him, taken just before I left. I would trace his face with a grimy finger every night, whispering stories to it, promising him I would come home. The monthly phone calls, expensive and monitored, were my lifeline. I would hear Arjun's voice, strained but healthy. "We are managing, Eliza. Send more next month. Eric is fine." And in the background, if I was lucky, I'd hear a baby's gurgle or a word, "Ma?" that would tear my heart in two and stitch it back together simultaneously. 2 years. I endured the pinches, the insults, the back-breaking labor, the profound loneliness for 2 years. My contract finally ended. I was free. I was given back my passport and a final pittance of pay. I was a ghost of myself, thin, hardened, my hands rough and cracked, my eyes old. But my heart was soaring. I was going home. I didn't announce my return. I wanted to see the surprise on their faces. I wanted to sweep Eric into my arms and never let go. I wanted to see the gratitude in Arjun's eyes, the love that had been buried under shame. Finally free. I boarded the plane with a hope so acute it was painful. The journey was a blur of anticipation. The familiar sights of my hometown, the bustling market, the dusty lanes, made my eyes well with tears. It was all still here. My life was waiting for me. I walked the final stretch from the bus stop, my cheap suitcase growing heavier with every step, my heart thumping a wild, joyful rhythm. I turned onto my street, and I stopped. The house looked different. It was freshly whitewashed. There was a new, bright blue door. A scooter I didn't recognize was parked outside. And then I saw him. A little boy. He couldn't have been more than 2.5, dressed in shorts and a vest that were too small and filthy. He was painfully thin, his ribs visible under his skin. His feet were bare and black with dirt. But his face was a punch to my soul. He had Arjun's nose, my father's brow. And his eyes, they were an unmistakable shade of hazel, like honey held to the sun. My mother's eyes. My eyes. In his small, grubby hand, he held a rusty bowl. He was holding it out listlessly to passers-by, his expression one of vacant hopelessness. It was Eric, my son. The world screeched to a halt. Sound faded, the ground tilted. My suitcase fell from my numb fingers with a thud. I couldn't breathe. I took a stumbling step forward, then another, my legs moving on some primal instinct. Eric? The name was a ragged tear from my throat. He looked up, startled. Those beautiful eyes, the eyes I had dreamed of for 2 years, held no recognition, only a dull fear. He took a shaky step backward. The new blue door opened. A woman stepped out. She was plump, prosperous, her arms and neck adorned with gold bangles and a chain. She was wearing a brand new bright fuchsia sari. In the crook of her arm, she held a fat, healthy baby, maybe 6 months old, dressed in crisp, clean clothes. She saw me first, a ragged stranger approaching her doorstep, and her face contorted in irritation. Hey, you! Get away from there! Move along! She shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. Then Arjun appeared behind her. He looked healthy. More than healthy. He had gained weight, looked strong and well-fed. He was wearing new, clean clothes. His arm, tanned and solid, slipped possessively around the woman's waist. He looked down at the little boy on the street, then at me, the strange woman frozen in place. His face underwent a terrifying transformation. First, sheer, unadulterated shock, his skin bleaching of all color. Then, a rapid calcification into a mask of defensive hostility. Eliza, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. I could not form words. I could only point a trembling, work-roughened finger at my child, my baby, standing like a beggar in the dust before his own home. Arjun had the decency to look momentarily ashamed, his eyes flicking away. The woman, however, understood instantly who I was. Her face hardened into a mask of pure contempt. Oh, she said, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. So you are the one. We wondered if you'd ever show your face again. What? What have you done? I finally choked out, my voice a broken thing. My eyes locked on Arjun, pleading for him to deny this nightmare. Arjun? What is this? Who is she? He couldn't meet my gaze. He stared at the ground. Eliza, you weren't here. Things were impossible. The debt, my parents, they arranged it. This is Mina, my wife. The words were meaningless sounds that refused to form sense in my mind. My wife. But I am your wife. The scream was torn from the very core of my being. Mina laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You were a maid in an Arab's house. Everyone knows what happens to women like you there. You are ruined, soiled goods. What kind of a man, a respectable man, would take back a wife who has been used by foreigners? Your place here was gone the day you left. Arjun needed a pure wife, a proper wife, to give him more children, to build a proper life, not a servant. I stared at Arjun, waiting for him to defend me, to push her away, to declare his love, to say something, anything. He stood there, silent, complicit, a healthy, whole man built on the cornerstone of my sacrifice. The full, monstrous truth finally breached the walls of my denial. It flooded me, icy and suffocating. My kidney was inside him. My money had rebuilt this house, bought this woman's gold, fed her fat baby. My years of degradation had purchased my own obsolescence. He had taken my organ, my flesh, and my labor, and he had used them to construct a new life where I was the inconvenient, dirty secret. You, I whispered, the words barely audible, charged with a hatred so profound it felt like it would burn me from the inside out. You have my kidney inside you. You live because of me. You breathe because of me. Mina's face twisted into a snarl. And we are grateful. But gratitude is not a marriage license. You have no claim here. This is my house. This, she said, jutting her chin towards the healthy baby in her arms, is his son and heir. And that, she spat, pointing a dismissive, jeweled finger at my terrified child cowering in the dust, is your bastard, the son of a ruined woman. He has no place here. He eats the food meant for my child. Now take your trash and get off my property. I looked at Eric, my beautiful boy, reduced to a piece of trash to be thrown out. I looked at Arjun, the man whose life was a gift from my body, who would not even look at his own firstborn son. The love that had sustained me through surgery, through poverty, through exile, it didn't break. It detonated. The explosion was silent, internal, and total. It shattered the very foundation of my being. What was left was not grief. It was a void. A howling, absolute zero darkness. The world swam, tilting on its axis. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was my son's dirt-streaked, terrified face. And then my legs gave way, and I collapsed onto the filthy road, right next to my begging child, in the dust of what was once, long ago, supposed to have been my home. The new moon had come, and it was not a promise. It was the utter, complete, and total absence of all light.